For Arnold and PNC Bank, this is Risk Recommendations 30-second radio. The code is XPUQ3734000. 30 seconds radio stereo.
PNC Private Bank doesn't take unnecessary risks managing your wealth because we know that maintaining its integrity is important to you. But as humans, we crave a little adrenaline, so our advisors have some ideas.
Sometimes I book a hotel without reading the reviews.
Occasionally, when no one is looking, I double dip.
Once while driving, I came to a full stop for 2 seconds instead of 3.
However you get your kicks, just know your wealth will remain steady and secure with us. PNC Private Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865. PNC Bank National Association, member FDIC.
This week on Viewpoints.
What we know is that these sort of programs really incentivize workers to report less.
A workplace can look safe and efficient on paper, but what does that record leave out about the people doing the work? Then,
one of the biggest frustrations with the boys and young men that we work with is that they say everyone talks about them, but nobody talks with them.
What is Looksmaxxing, and why are young boys getting sucked in? I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Support for this podcast comes from Progressive, America's #1 boat insurer. We've all made mistakes on the water, but there's one mistake you shouldn't make: being uninsured. With Progressive Boat Insurance, you can choose coverage for most mistakes you or other boaters could make, helping you float carefree all season long. Quote today: Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. #1 rating based on 2024 filings with state departments of insurance.
A pizza party can celebrate a birthday, a sales goal, or the end of a busy stretch at work. For some companies, it can also be the prize for reaching a certain number of days without a reported injury. That may sound like a safety win, but it can put the person who gets hurt in an awkward position, speak up, and everyone loses out. But workplace mistreatment doesn't always begin with an accident. It can also look like unpredictable hours, unstable pay, constant pressure, or the feeling that your job is essential even though you're treated as replaceable and unskilled. There's a big difference between a safe and supportive workplace on paper versus in reality. Jessica Martinez is the executive director of the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health, better known as COSH.
There are companies that will claim to have a safety culture, but incentivize workers with, a bonus, a pizza party, if they go X amount of days without reporting an injury. What we know is that these sort of programs really incentivize workers to report less. And truly what we are saying is what our workforce needs to do, we need to incentivize workers to report more to prevent these injuries and illness, right, in the workplaces. So if more workers are aware of the conditions of work, of the impacts to their health, then we're truly creating a safety culture.
The latest federal data counted more than 5,000 work-related deaths in 2024. That's 1 every 104 minutes. Private industry employers also reported 2.5 million non-fatal injuries and illnesses. But that second number is exactly what the government calls it: employer-reported. The reality is that national data doesn't fully capture what workers are experiencing, and that gap extends beyond injuries. Sometimes the harm shows up in the uncertainty and stress built into the job itself. Benjamin Lorr is a writer and the author of The Secret Life of Groceries. While researching the book, he spoke with workers in many segments of the food supply chain. He also took a job at a local grocery store.
I also worked at a Whole Foods fish counter for a short stint to just really get the experience of working in the store. And there are a lot of things that came out of that. One, probably most salient, was just how difficult the scheduling process can be for retail workers. I mean, I think most of us carry in our heads, if you haven't worked in retail, you have this idea that, of course, it's kind of a low-paying job. It's an entry-level job. But over the last 20 years or so, there's been a shift in how scheduling is done, and that kind of mimics the way that product shipments are done. So people are treated a little bit more like products, which is like highly in demand when they're needed, and there's high demand moments in the store, and then kind of obnoxious waste if there's a slow demand and told to go home.
For the store, that flexibility kept staffing close to customer demand. For the employee, it meant not knowing how many hours would appear on their next paycheck and not having a steady stream of reliable income to depend on.
When I was working, a lot of the people I was working with wouldn't get their schedule more than 3 or 4 days in advance. And the hours that you're working vary from week to week by large margins, 40%, which means that your take-home pay varies. And of course, because not just the volume of time you're working shifts, but when you're working, you can't get a second job to supplement that because there's no schedule, no coherent schedule for your second job to schedule around.
The worker is expected to remain available, but the company doesn't guarantee that the hours will be there. Lorr says this can leave employees functioning like on-call workers without the pay, stability, or respect that usually comes with that responsibility. As he moved further down the food supply chain, he saw conditions worsen.
What goes on to create that raft of privilege that the grocery store floats us on? There's an enormous amount of sacrifice going on at every single level. So not just the employees in the store who are working these low-paid, variable scheduled jobs, but at each level of the chain, there is a race to the bottom mentality that often results in cuts to labor, and it gets worse the farther away and the less visible you get. So at the lowest levels, people take advantage of that obscurity, that lack of visibility, and it enables the worst human qualities, and you get really, really abusive conditions, the type that is almost mind-blowing.
This broken system also extends past food production and into the distribution chain as well. Trucking is the primary mode of food transportation in the U.S., with 70% of all food being delivered by trucks. But for some of these drivers working around the clock, the industry has trapped them in a cycle of debt and manipulation.
So I drove around with a trucker. Trucking is a gargantuan industry, and many of the truckers I've talked with were trapped in a system of that they described as sharecropping on wheels. That was essentially a debt peonage that had to do with the burden of debt they took on to both get their trucking license and then to become kind of quote-unquote owner-operators of their truck, required taking on a lot of debt, and the companies would then manipulate that debt to prevent them from working for other companies and participating in a true free market, or just squeeze out their hours if they wouldn't accept rides at low rates.
In many cases, large companies rely on staffing agencies, contractors, and subcontractors for hiring, which causes confusion over who's ultimately responsible when there's an issue.
There is lack of clarity of ultimately who's accountable, right? You have these subcontracting systems that makes it very fuzzy for employers to understand ultimately who's responsible to ensure that workers have the equipment they need for safe workplaces, the training that they need, that there are mechanisms in place. Even in cases when workers are injured, they get the go around. Many of them have to rely then on government assistance. So there's a very toxic cycle of caring essentially for working people in this country through these supply chains.
Federal law prohibits employers from retaliating against workers who report an injury or raise a safety concern. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, commonly known as OSHA, also warns companies not to use prizes, bonuses, or disciplinary programs in ways that discourage reporting. But a right on paper doesn't always remove the fear of losing hours or being replaced. For someone who thinks their workplace is making them sick or putting them in danger, Martinez urges to start documenting and having conversations with colleagues.
The power of collective action is really true and offers just more protections in a real sense, right? It's harder to retaliate against a group of workers than an individual. So we always encourage workers to talk to their coworkers, agree and make a plan before they submit a formal complaint to their employer, but even to agencies like OSHA. There is a mechanism to submit complaints to OSHA, make sure that it's well equipped with photos, with evidence, with documentation, and do the follow-up so you can have an inspection. And workers can do it anonymously. Like I said, retaliation is a growing concern across the country for many, many workers. So do that. And then if there is a local kosh group or a worker center, or if you're a unionized worker where you have your union, speak to them, talk to them, reach out, let them know what's going on to get more support and guidance on how to move forward, with the worker's particular case.
A clean safety record, a lean schedule, and a low-cost product can look like everything's fine from far away. But from close up, it's the employees who carry all the burden while corporate profits grow. To learn more about workplace safety, reporting resources, and our guests, Jessica Martinez and Benjamin Lorr, head to viewpointsradio.org. This story was written and produced by our executive producer, Amirah Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jay Silvers. I'm Gary Price.
Coming up, the term Looksmaxxing is so trendy this summer. But what happens when it goes too far? When Viewpoints returns.
When you own your own business, you own every decision.
Catch the red eye or take the 6 a.m.
Make a new hire or promote internally.
Celebrate a win with the toast at the gate or unwind at the lounge. Big props to this team.
Some decisions are a win-win, like earning 8 times points on Chase Travel. Chase Sapphire Reserve for Business, the business card that gives back all you put in. Visit chase.com/reserve business to learn more. Cards issued by JPMorgan Chase Bank, N.A. member FDIC, subject to credit approval. Terms apply.
Support for this podcast comes from Progressive, America's #1 boat insurer. We've all made mistakes on the water, but there's one mistake you shouldn't make: being uninsured. With Progressive Boat Insurance, you can choose coverage for most mistakes you or other boaters could make, helping you float carefree all season long. Quote today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. #1 rating based on 2024 filings with state departments of insurance.
If you've spent any time on social media lately, you've probably come across the term Looksmaxxing. There are a lot of different definitions out there, but it all boils down to how to look more attractive. What started as a niche internet trend has exploded into a massive online movement. And now millions of young men are sharing advice on skincare and fitness to more extreme ideas like plastic surgery. Supporters say it's all about self-improvement, but critics like Mike Nicholson, founder and director of Progressive Masculinity, warn that it creates unrealistic beauty standards. He says that Looksmaxxing can come in many different forms.
Soft maxing, hard maxing. There's been a growth in Looksmaxxing influencers. If we start with soft maxing, so an influencer like Dylan Latham, for example, a very popular soft maxer, he would talk about how it's important to look after your skin. He would give tips on hairstyling, on what an effective gym routine might look like. Actually, all things that many boys and young men would be interested in, nothing particularly unhealthy about it. It becomes unhealthy when the messaging changes from you can do this if you want to you must do this to be seen as a proper man. You are not a real man unless you have a chiseled jawline, unless you have low body fat, high muscle density, unless you have clear skin. That's when it becomes problematic for us.
Unlike traditional self-care and beauty routines, many Looksmaxxers often take it to an extreme. One example is a trend called bone smashing, which involves repeatedly hitting the facial bones with hard objects based on the false belief that the body will heal the bone into a more chiseled shape. You're probably thinking, that's crazy, and wondering why people would do something so dangerous for a different bone structure. Nicholson says for many Looksmaxxers, looks are just the beginning. They believe an improved appearance will also lead to greater status, success, and social acceptance.
Young men are often sold the message online that if I improve my face and body, my status in the world will improve. And online communities are very good at providing certainty. And that's what a lot of boys are after. In a very confusing, sometimes frightening world, a formula for success and status is very seductive. And then we've also got this consumer culture around us, which sells this idea of self-improvement. Always optimize yourself, always max yourself. Now that becomes a problem when self-worth becomes tied to this relentless pursuit of optimization. Self-improvement is, can be a wonderful thing and something that we should all be pursuing, but it's when it's relentless and ruthless and judgmental and damaging, which is what it can be when you get to more extreme influencers like Clavicula, who I've seen him give advice to boys who are short. Height is a big thing in the man's world.
The social media influencer Clavicular, whose real name is Braden Peters, has 1 million followers on TikTok and Instagram. He's been open about his desire to go under the knife, to be taller.
You can go to Turkey, for example, and pay a few £1,000s for an illegal operation where they'll smash your bones, put pins in, so the bone then regrows in that gap, and you might gain 2 or 3 inches of height. But those surgeries are often performed by unregulated medical, I wouldn't say experts, but unregulated medical practices, and they can be crippling for the rest of your life.
Clavicular's massive online following makes him one of the most influential figures in the Looksmaxxing movement. While the community had previously existed in obscure online forums, he helped push it into the mainstream, bringing it to a much wider audience of young boys. His appeal doesn't just come from showing before and after results, but the way he explains the process step by step. And now studies estimate that nearly 2/3 of young men regularly consume content from him and other Looksmaxxing influencers. It's a scary example of how social media can take relatively unknown online trends and rapidly expand their reach and impact.
Looksmaxxing is actually nothing new. It's the digital evolution of something that's been happening, body pressure, for a long time. And I think as a society, we've become aware of how disgusting body pressure is for women. I know we've still got a long way to go with it, but I feel like, things like the body positivity movement, and you see diverse female body shapes within the media a little bit more than you used to. But when I go back to when I grew up in the 1980s, I was surrounded by Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Jean-Claude Van Damme, this kind of era of hypermasculinity. And as a naturally slim guy, I hated myself. I hated my reflection in the mirror. I tell the boys in the workshop this, I remember closing my door and locking it, doing some press-ups when I was about 13, and then trying to flex in front of the mirror and thinking, what the hell is that? Who's ever going to want you looking like that? So this actually isn't something new. But the digital world has kind of taken it, run with it, and as the digital world does, it's expanded it greatly.
According to studies from the National Institutes of Health, 80% of adolescent boys experience some level of body dissatisfaction. Concerns with being overweight among boys also rose by 46% between 2007 and 2018, coinciding with the rise of social media. But that's not the only reason Looksmaxxing content is resonating with this group. Many young people are coming of age at a time when landing a stable job, buying a home, or reaching other traditional milestones of success feels impossible. For some who feel shut out of these opportunities, improving appearance can seem like an alternative path to status, confidence, and even personal or romantic success.
We also can acknowledge that at a national level, particularly in the United States, where we've had, employment challenges, particularly for white males, and for a younger population where, because of the financial structures or family decisions, young people are not necessarily coming out of college and getting the dream job. Young people can't necessarily have a job and say, now I can buy my first home. So those markers of success, those traditional American ideals and markers of success that are often associated with males, were not necessarily or haven't been as easily achievable as they have been presented. Hey, get a good job, go to school, graduate, you're going to be able to have the American dream. That has not been happening for this generation.
That's Valerie Adams Bass, a psychologist at University of Virginia's Youth Next Center, specializing in positive youth development. For young boys who aren't looking to hit those milestones just yet, the desire for status can be just as powerful. For preteens and teens who are particularly impressionable, Looksmaxxing content taps into their deepest insecurities.
Even at 9 and 10 years old, we regularly get things like, I need to be taller, I need more muscle, if I don't look like this, I won't be successful in life. So these body insecurities that young men have start from a very young age, but also they don't have safe spaces where they can actually share that with someone. So me telling that story, for example, that often gives psychological safety for boys to say, yeah, I don't like my body either, or I wish I was a bit bigger. That I'll go first approach that our facilitators use creates that space that the boys feel like they're not going to be judged then.
And while this spans all demographics, it can be even greater for boys and men of color. Adams-Bass says most Looksmaxxing content idealizes Eurocentric features like straight hair, narrow noses, and prominent cheekbones, reinforcing the harmful message that white features are superior.
Conversations around what will make you attractive, what will make you not just in terms of relationships, romantic relationships, but peer relationships, business relationships. How can you be successful? And a lot of that had to do with a particular aesthetic, right? A white Anglo-Saxon aesthetic that had a more, a chiseled chin, strong, broad shoulders, a particular angled nose, particular hair color. That aesthetic does not align with how African-American males or Latinx or Hispanic males look. And so you're not going to find necessarily Black males who become the personalities, the influencers, because the challenges that white males are facing are not necessarily the challenges that Black males are facing, right? And also Black males tend to mature in puberty earlier. They have a deeper voice, all the things that are not aligning with the experiences of white males.
For parents, teachers, and anyone else concerned about the impact of this content, what can you do? Adams-Bass recommends paying attention to the content young people are engaging with and take a closer look at the creators and influencers they follow who are shaping their ideas about confidence and self-worth.
It's extra work. I'm a parent myself, but you need to be in the social media spaces that your young people are in. And so you may not be there. You can't be there all the time. Choose one or two, maybe one of the most popular, one that's least popular. Have a family account, email address. Have access to passwords. They may change them, but have a way to get into those accounts. I'm not saying you need to be in there all the time, but you need to at least peek into them. And even if you have a parallel account where you're just going in and checking out what young people are talking about, because the influencers, that's why they're called influencers, right, are influential. So you may have a young person who seems perfectly fine, and over time, because of the narrative that they're following, right, because of the people that's popping up on their social media feeds, they're becoming someone else or something different.
For his part, Nicholson believes the most important thing adults can do is sit down with young boys and have an open conversation. Let them know it's a safe space to talk about their insecurities and that it's okay to express their feelings. Encourage them to get involved in positive communities like sports, clubs, or other activities where they can build confidence and find community in a healthy way. Above all, Nicholson says, listen.
One of the boys' biggest frustrations is we need to stop talking about them and talk with them, because they will tell us the truth. We might not like what they say, but that's not their responsibility. Like, the boys will be honest if we create a space that's safe enough, but currently they feel like they're being unseen and unheard. And that's making them vulnerable to these guys online who say, no, I see you. No, I care about you. Come and listen to me. I'll sort you out.
To learn more about Mike Nicholson, Valerie Adams-Bass, and all our featured guests, visit viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on X, Facebook, and Instagram. This segment was written and produced by Grace Galanti. Our executive producer is Amirah Zaveri. Studio production by Jay Silvers. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
Support for this podcast comes from Progressive, America's #1 boat insurer. We've all made mistakes on the water, but there's one mistake you shouldn't make: being uninsured. With Progressive Boat Insurance, you can choose coverage for most mistakes you or other boaters could make, helping you float carefree all season long. Quote today: Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. #1 rating based on 2024 filings with state departments of insurance.
This is Viewpoints Explained. I'm Ebony McMorris. Imagine spending more than $50 million at an auction and staying completely anonymous. That's the question surrounding Gus, an almost complete skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was sold by Sotheby's auction house in July to a mystery phone bidder for $50.1 million. The sale is the most expensive fossil ever sold. Gus is different because it's about 80% complete by mass and still has its feet, pelvis, and wishbone fully intact, unlike most other T-Rex fossils. It's also 67 million years old and was uncovered in South Dakota back in 2021. Fully intact fossils like this are so important because it can help humans learn more about how dinosaurs grew, moved, and lived. From a sale perspective, a private auction doesn't automatically mean an important object will disappear forever. Some buyers eventually loan their purchases to museums. For example, the Stegosaurus known as Apex, which sold for almost $45 million in 2024, is now on display at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. The difference is that the decision results fully with the owner. Until they come forward, researchers may not know where a fossil is being stored, where they can examine it, or if the public will ever see it. The same concern comes up when anonymous collectors buy rare paintings, historical documents, or cultural artifacts. Sometimes these objects end up in museums, and other times they move into private homes or storage facilities and aren't seen again for many years. One possible compromise is to require stronger agreements before one-of-a-kind objects are sold at auction. The companies like Sotheby's could ask buyers to allow research access or place the item on public loan for part of each year. At the end of the day, science and museums rely on private money to protect these pieces long term. However, the question is whether ownership should also come with some responsibility to keep them available to scientists and the public. That's Viewpoints Explained for this week. More in a moment.
Welcome to Culture Crash, where we examine what's new and old in entertainment. Once again, Christopher Nolan has released a new film, and once again, that film is a massive success, scoring big with critics and audiences, as well as at the box office. Like The Dark Knight, Inception, The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, Dunkirk, and Oppenheimer before it, Nolan's new film The Odyssey is a slam dunk smash hit that's prompting even the most casual of moviegoers to consider what it might be like to see a movie in 70mm IMAX. The Odyssey is, of course, based on the Homeric epic, a classic of Greek mythology and a cornerstone of Western literature. It's a story full of monsters and reveals, and Nolan uses it as a canvas to create something that is both a perfect culmination of all that came before in his career, and also a singular achievement that edges more into horror than he's ever gone before. Odysseus' clash with the Cyclops and his crew's run-in with the sorceress Circe are two jaw-dropping sequences in a film full of them. Samantha Morton plays Circe as a rightly scared woman living alone, willing to do anything to keep herself safe. Ludwig Göransson's score, Hoyte van Hoytema's cinematography, Jennifer Lane's editing, and Morton's performance itself culminate to create one of the best movie scenes in years. Of course, the film is built around Matt Damon's Odysseus, and he delivers in spades. In a cast chock full of stars, Robert Pattinson, Anne Hathaway, Elliot Page, and Himesh Patel provide a few of the movie's richest performances that punctuate Nolan's practical filmmaking style, full of wide vistas, stunning ocean photography, and some of the biggest and loudest action set pieces ever put to film, with a surprising amount of emotion and humanity. Already, audiences are asking what comes next for Christopher Nolan. Does he go pure horror? Does he scale back? Or does he find a way to somehow go even bigger from here? Of course, none of us have any idea, but I do know that The Odyssey is another record-breaking piece of Nolan's filmography that's destined to be watched in living rooms and art house cinemas for decades to come. I'm Evan Rook.
We know life is busy. That's why saving money should be effortless. With Atlantic Union Bank's Roundup Savings, every time you use your debit card, your purchase rounds up to the nearest dollar and automatically goes into savings. So whether you're grabbing coffee, filling the tank, or picking up groceries, you're saving without even thinking about it. It's just one of the ways Atlantic Union Bank makes managing your money easy. Learn more at AtlanticUnionBank.com or stop by a branch today. Atlantic Union Bank. Any way you bank.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.
Do you wish you could relive the most meaningful moments in your life? Like that legendary birthday celebration, your first wedding anniversary, or the day you got your diploma. You can't turn back time, but you can revisit those memories with a Hallmark card. When you give a Hallmark card, you give a reminder of the relationships, emotions, and moments that make up their big, meaningful, magical life. So make the moment last. Make it a Hallmark card. Shop at Hallmark.com or wherever Hallmark cards are sold.
When you own your own business, you own every decision.
Catch the red eye or take the 6 a.m.
Make a new hire or promote internally.
Celebrate a win with the toast at the gate or unwind at the lounge. Big props to this team.
Some decisions are a win-win, like earning 8 times points on Chase Travel. Chase Sapphire Reserve for Business, the business card that gives back all you put in. Visit chase.com/reserve business to learn more. Cards issued by JPMorgan Chase Bank, N.A. member FDIC, subject to credit approval. Terms apply.